Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. In our previous session, we had begun with verses 83, and the section of verses that we will continue will be until verse 103. But in our previous session, we had covered until verse 94. So today we will start off the discussion with verse 94 and 95 and go on to 103. And after your questions, we will also then take up the task of literal translation and then, of course, the idiomatic translation. The important thing that we have to understand here, once again, to connect ourselves, that we need to do again and again, that Surah Baqarah, which is under study, it is a surah which is directed primarily at the Jews of the Prophet's times, in particular, and a charge sheet of their crimes and their sins have been handed out. And you'll find that every now and then the Almighty says that, well, you did this and you did that, and in spite of this, we forgave you. And then you went back on your word and you then made a new commitment. And once again, you broke your word and went back on your promise. So this is like a continuous process, or it's like a chain of events which has happened in their history over a period of 2,000 years, in which this breach, to be exact, it could be 1,500 years, in particular, after the arrival of Moses, between Moses and Jesus, the time that has elapsed in which this breach has occurred. And as far as this breach is concerned, it is something which has became a norm in their lives. And as far as the Quran is concerned, the basic case which has been raised by the Quran against them is that they were waiting for a prophet of God. It's not that Prophet Muhammad has come to them as an unintroduced personality. That's not the case. He is someone who they very well knew. All their prophets, they predicted his arrival. In particular, Moses and Jesus, both of them, they were very vehement in their prophecies. And these predictions are even today found in the Old and the New Testament. And of course, the name of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has been erased. We don't find his name. But in Surah Araf, we know from the Quran that the name was written in Torah, in Injil, of his name being Ahmed. So we find this reference in the Quran that Muhammad ﷺ was mentioned by his name in these two scriptures. So you can see how the Quran is building up this case against them and telling them time and again that you not only breached your commitment, but you have, now that the Prophet Muhammad has arrived, you should have been the first to profess faith in him, but that's not the case. And now you have not only not accepted him as a prophet, but you have gone against him. And as the Quran has said at a number of places, it's because of your arrogance and jealousy for the fact that why didn't a prophet come into their own lineage, which is the Israelites, and why did he come amongst the Ishmaelites? So let us start and resume the study that we had just started in our previous session, and this is verse 94. It says, "Qul in kanat lakumud darul akhiratu indallahi khalisatan min dunin nas fatamannavul mauta in kuntum sadiqin." Tell them, if to God the abode of the hereafter is for yourselves alone, leaving all others aside, then be desirous of death, if you are true in this claim of yours. So remember, they were people who had, in their own times, made this claim that they are the chosen people of God, and whatever happens here, in the hereafter, they will be the favored ones of the Almighty. They will be very close to him. And the Quran at this juncture has made this comment that, well, if you think that you are chosen people of God, then why don't you desire death? And why is it that you're fearful of death? Because we know that it was an ailment that was found amongst the Jews, that they would be, in particular the Jews, they would be very, very wary of death, and in fact that they would like to live a lot. This is mentioned in the Quran elsewhere, and we will just be studying that. So, فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتَ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ, that if you think that the hereafter belongs to you, it is you who are going to be the chosen ones in the hereafter, then be desirous of death. And then the Quran says, وَلَن يَتَمَنَّوْهُ أَبَدًا بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ. And you will see that they shall never wish for it, owing to the earning of their hands which they have sent forward. And in reality, God is fully aware of these unjust people. So basically, this is a claim that they make, but the fact is that they are very scared of death. And the Quran has pointed out the reason for this. بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. The misdeeds that they have done in this world and they have sent forward, they know that they shall be called to account for that. So the fact is that instead of being desirous of the fact that they would like to go and meet the Almighty, this is what they claim, because it is then that they will be given favors and gifts from God. But the real thing behind all this is that they are not at all, desirous of death. They are very scared of death, because they know that the misdeeds that they have done will not sit well with God, and they will be punished and taken to account for that. So it says then, وَلَا تَجِدَنَّهُمْ أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى حَيَاءٍ وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ لَوْ يُعَمَّرُ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ وَمَا هُوَ بِمُزَحْزِحِهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ أَنْ يُعَمَّرَ وَاللَّهُ بَصِيرٌ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ. And you will find them to be the greediest of all people for life, and so much so, even more than those who have adopted idolatry as their religion. Each of them longs that he is able to live 1,000 years, whereas even if their lives are thus prolonged, he shall not be able to save himself through it from the torment of God, and undoubtedly God is watching all that they do. So this is what the Quran has, really made them, and it has put them to shame. That, well, this is what you think, that going to God is going to make you more favorable in His eyes, and you're going to win more reward, then be desirous of death. But as we saw in the previous verses, that they are not going to desire death because of their misdeeds, and in fact, such is their love of life, that if they are made to live 1,000 years, and even if they are given a life as long as 1,000 years, and this life is prolonged in this manner, they will never be desirous of death. So such is their love for this life, that on the one hand they claim that they would like to go and meet the Almighty and win His favors, and on the other hand they would not like to leave this world for the love of life they have. And clearly you can see here also the Quran has compared them, or this desire of theirs, with the idolaters. See, the idolaters too had this love to live long, this longevity, this love for longevity was there in them. But the love of this longevity amongst the Jews was the most. And that is why clearly the Quran says that, well, this is what the situation is, that if you are going to do this, then you must not be led into the fact that they are very desirous of death. Muslims should know that this is how it is going to happen, that even if they are given 1,000 years to live, وَمَا هُوَ بِمُزَحْزِحِهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ, they shall not be able to save themselves from the torment of God. So as we go along, remember that this section is addressing the Jews, as I said earlier on, and pointing out their chart sheet. And this chart sheet is something which we shall be we shall be encountering time after time and verse after verse, which tells us that how important it is to understand why is it that the wrath of the Almighty, His anger against the Jews is so much. It's not just something that they did for some small number of years. It was a very, very long stretch of time in which they continued to make promises and they continued to break those promises. They went back time after time and they indulged in as heinous a sin as polytheism. So it's the wrath of the Almighty can very well be understood because of this repeated behavior on their part. And then verse 97 and 98, قُلْ مَنْ كَانَ عَدُوًّا لِجِبْرِيلَ فَإِنَّهُ نَزَّلَهُ عَلَىٰ قَلْبِكَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ وَهُدًى وَبُشْرَىٰ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ مَنْ كَانَ عَدُوًّا لِلَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَجِبْرِيلَ وَمِيكَالَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَدُوٌّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. So because of their enmity with the Quran, they have now become enemies of Gabriel. So because of the fact that they would say that why isn't that Gabriel brought it down to someone from their own brethren from among the Israelites, and they, in their enmity with the Prophet and the Quran, they went as far as to say that now it is Gabriel who is our enemy. So the Quran says those people who are enemies of Gabriel, they in reality are enemies of God, because he, O Prophet, has revealed it to your heart only by the permission of God, in confirmation of the predictions which are present from before, and as guidance and glad tidings for those who believe. So the comment of the Quran is that, well, it's not that Gabriel has brought down this wahi or this new scripture to the Prophet on his own. It's God who has commanded him to do so. So if they show animosity with Gabriel, the fact is that it's not Gabriel who is their enemy. They think that God is their enemy, because Gabriel hasn't done this by his own self, by his own accord. It is God who has commanded him to bring down a revelation to Muhammad. So if anything, then they are not just enemies of Gabriel, they're enemies of God. And then if this is the case, there says, Man kana aduwwa lillahi wa malaikatihi wa rusulihi wa jibrila wa mikala fa inna Allah aduwwul lil kafirin. The wrath and anger is so apparent in these verses. So it says that they should know that those who are enemies of God, his angels and his prophets and Gabriel and Michael is Mikael, then God too is the enemy of such believers. And they thought the reason that Mikael is mentioned here is because they thought that Mikael was a friendly angel to them, and he showed them favor, whereas Gabriel did not show them favor. But here the Quran has grouped both these angels as one unit, as being the fact that both are the same. I mean, both belong to the genre of angels. So if this is the case, then they are enemies of Mikael as well. And one thing that you have to note here is these words which say that Gabriel has revealed the Quran on his heart with the permission of God, musaddiqan lima bayna yadayhi, in confirmation with what was before them, referring to the fact that this Quran has come according to the predictions, according to the prophecies of the Torah. And Torah has mentioned these prophecies, as I just referred to earlier on, and on several occasions, and we have references, especially, and there are books written on the prophecies which are found in the Bible, in particular the Torah, regarding the arrival of Muhammad. And it is so clear regarding some of the prophecies that they just cannot be applied to anyone other than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only thing is that his name has been erased, but the way his persona is presented, one can be unmistakably clear that it is none other but him who is being discussed. So before I go on to the in fact, let me cover this verse as well, because we will be changing a slight topic from verse 101. So the next part is وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ وَمَا يَكْفُرُ بِهَا إِلَّا الْفَاسِقُونَ أَوَكُلَّمَا أَحَدُوا أَحْدًا نَبَذَهُ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. And in the shape of the Quran, O Prophet, we have sent down to you very clear arguments, and in reality none deny them except such defiant people. Will this only continue to happen, that whenever they make a promise, one of their groups will throw it away? In fact, the truth is that most of them do not even profess faith. So, bal aktharuhum la yu'minun actually means that they might present themselves to be people who believe, but the fact is, this is not the case. They are equally, they're just trying to deceive Muslims in this regard. They have to understand, Muslims have to understand that when they say that they profess faith, again, it is a dubious way in which they would use words as if it would be conveying to the Muslims that they have believed in Muhammad and the last day. Whereas we know from other parts of the Quran, when they say, Qalu amanna, they would say that, well, yes, we believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet, but not for us, but for the Muslims. So this is when the Quran on such an occasion has tried to expose them and tried to expose this hypocrisy on their part. So before we move on to verse 101, and a slight shift in topic will occur in that verse. If you have any questions regarding the verses that we have studied from verse 94 to 100, please raise them now.
Right. The first question is from Naushad Shafkat. Please go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Saab, Salaam alaikum. Just a slight clarification needed. Uh, Fearing death is something I think even the most pious amongst us would be fearful of death.
Right.
And putting this as one of the conditions showing that the Jews are not, on the right path, that would be a little difficult. Could you explain this?
Right.
Because fearing death, I think, comes naturally.
I understand. Actually, the word used by the Quran is ahrasan nas, which means that they have this greed for this life. So it's not just the scare of death, it's basically to live as long as you can. And obviously, as normal people, we also wish to live as long as we would like to do. But then our life is, I mean, always when we pray for a longer life, we always pray that God gives us his blessings as well. And if our life is prolonged by the will of God, we are able to do good deeds. So this is like a God-fearing person praying to God for a long life. But in the case of the Jews, it was, as the Quran has said, ahrasan nas. They were people who had this greed to live as long as they could, so that they could delay meeting the Almighty Himself. So it was as if this worldly life had caught hold of them. So the love of this worldly life is basically reflected. So it's not the scare of death as much as the love of this worldly life, as long as you could provide it, and becoming a slave to these material gains, which we find so many other people to be the case as well in these times. But in their case, this became a trait of theirs that was pointed out by the Quran.
Thank you. Riaz, you can ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Walaikum assalam.
It says the nazzalahu ala qalbika. So does it mean it is the spiritual heart? I mean,
so this is something that what I would call, this is amongst the mutashabihat. We just cannot know what the nature of that revelation is. All that we know is this. Of course, it's not the spiritual heart; it's the heart that we that is the center of the soul. You see, for the Quran, it's not just a organ which beats in our chests and is responsible for the circulation of the blood. For the Quran, the heart has a deeper significance, and it always says that the heart is the center of the soul. Somehow, the soul manifests itself, the cognizant being in the heart. So when it says the heart, it actually refers to the center of your soul. And how it is done, that of course we cannot know. But the thing is that that Gabriel is given this task to reveal it directly to Prophet Muhammad's heart. So what is perhaps being sounded here and made clear is that there's no interference from anyone else. There's nothing in between the angel and Prophet himself. It is the Prophet who receives directly from this angel. So ala qalbika is actually the heart that we have. But the heart that we have, as I said, is not just a physical organ that we know it is, but it is much more than that. And in the language of the Quran, because we find elsewhere the heart being mentioned, in as-sam'a wal basara wal fu'ada kullu ulaika kana anhu mas'ula, that your heart and your sight and your hearing will be called to question. So your heart cannot be called to question because it's just beating if you take it in the biological sense. So the Quran attaches a more deeper and significance to it in the sense that it's the center of our soul. It is here that we get awareness of that good and evil. It is here that our real personality manifests itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Naushad Shafkat, you may ask your question again.
Sir, I'm sorry, my mic misfunctioned.
Okay.
Still, even no matter how pious, how long a person lives, and he continues doing pious deeds, isn't the fear of death still lingering on even the most ardent of believers?
That is
Still
correct.
not convinced about that. Sir.
You see, this sentence of theirs is occurring in a context, and they say that, well, the hereafter is something that is always going to be ours. Whatever is going to happen in this world, it's going to happen, and this is something that whenever we reach God, we will be honored by Him, we will be favored by Him. And the Quran is actually commenting on this. It's like a counter question that, well, if you are so close to God, why don't you desire death? I mean, the word desire is not in the meaning that we generally think that, well, since all of us are scared of death, so therefore I mean, such a demand would be unreasonable. The context is different, actually. You see, the context is that they think that the hereafter belongs to them. And when it will come, I mean, they will be rewarded even more. So the Quran is making this remark that, well, if you think that the hereafter belongs to you, why don't you go and desire that hereafter to come and be you be there as soon as possible. It's not that the Quran is saying that you go there. It's saying that why don't you wish for that to happen? Because the counter claim which the Quran is making is that they don't wish to go to the hereafter. I mean, they don't even wish to die. What to speak of the fact that they would desire go and meet the Almighty because of the misdeeds that they have done. So you see, this desire of or the scare for death is not mentioned in the context that you have understood. It's the context in which the Quran is trying to counter question them that, well, if you think that the hereafter belongs to you, then why don't you go there? When the Quran says, why don't you go there, it actually doesn't reflect on the fact that they are scared of death. The fact is that they would like to prolong their life as much as possible and not even try to go in the hereafter. I mean, their desire would be to live forever, in other words. Why? Because the Quran has said that the misdeeds that they have done, they know in their hearts that they would be questioned for those misdeeds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shabnam, you may ask your question now.
Thank you, Mariam. Sir, referring to the answer of brother asked about heart, sir, I wanted to ask that Quran uses intellect and heart as synonyms because at various places Quran says, why don't you, afala yaqilun, afala taqilun. So, kindly tell something about this.
So that is a different, you see, aql is a different faculty, and that is something which relates to the mind. Ta'aqqul or tatafakkarun or all other words which mean reflection. So they are not related to the heart. They are related to the mind or to your aql or to your intellect. The heart is the center of the soul in the sense that it is the seat on the basis of which or through which you are able to have that cognizance of good and evil, right and wrong. And you are able to know that your soul is, I mean, of course, we are not able to know, but this is how the Quran speaks of the fact that our inner personality, which is our soul, it is somehow concentrated in our heart. It's like that, and that like point of concentration of the whole soul being in the heart. So that is a separate thing. The aql faculty is the faculty which relates to your mind, and that is separate from the heart.
Annie, you may ask your question now.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad.
Salam.
So again, 297, and this is again, Gabriel is mentioned twice in Quran, and this is the only one where he's explicitly mentioned as the transmitter of God's message to the Prophet. But how that message is transmitted is not mentioned. So it's not that, and my question is that when we look at the traditional model or, the exegesis, which you've also just mentioned, it follows this very fax machine kind of a model of prophethood in which, there's a revelation which is brought down to the prophet. The prophet is transmitting it as it is onwards. There is no impact of his own intellect or his own intelligence. In fact, in tradition, we tend to emphasize the fact and even take pride on his being ummi or ignorant. But then you look at the verse itself, it doesn't, it's quiet as to how that message is transmitted. And then the position we seem to take is that it's something we can't understand, so we won't speculate as to it. So we will just believe that the message was transmitted to him in the way that we have received it. So is that not a very big assumption to make? Because depending on how that revelation happened and what our belief is with regards to the mode of that revelation, was it an inspiration? Was it a word-for-word message? Was it God's message which when uttered turned into human language? Does it not change the way that we view our book and our religion? And why are we so afraid of, answering that question?
Well, you see, the Quran is made at amply clear at other instances that basically the person of the prophet is like a receptacle. It's like a receiver, and that receiver is catching that frequency of revelation, and his real job, of course, is to transmit that revelation the way he has received it. And I mean, it's not just that he is, I mean, a machine who receives and transmits. The next most important job is that he is trying to not only transmit that, but to follow that message and become an example amongst Muslims, and at the same time answer questions if they are he's asked about those questions, and become a role model for Muslims. Because not only that, we know that's not just the Quran which is the source of religion. His own practice, which is the established Sunnah, is also an independent source from the Quran. So first, the thing that should be dispelled from our minds is that he's not just God forbid, a fax machine who is receiving faxes and just transmitting them. That is just one part of the process which the Almighty has adopted, that he had to give this message, whatever he wanted to reveal, to some human being. So his own role starts after that, as a person who is going to follow that, who's going to become a role model on that, whatever he's receiving, and as an example setting for other people. And as far as the message itself is concerned, the Quran has made it clear at different in different ways that this is not, I mean, it's not just an inspiration of words in which an idea is probably revealed to Prophet, and then the Prophet speaks through his own words. So that is also not the case, because in Surah Shura we get to know that words of the Almighty are revealed and not just an inspiration or the idea. And also, I would like to comment on the understanding of the word ummi. Now, it is not correct to believe that the word ummi is actually referring to the fact that the Prophet was uneducated. Whether he was uneducated or not is a separate discussion. But the Quranic term ummi is a derogatory term which was used by the Jews for the Bani Ismail, because they thought that they are people who have not received God's scripture ever since Abraham. And for a whole, I mean, so many thousands of years, I mean, so many hundreds of years at least, they are without any scripture. So being without a scripture was something that they regarded by them to be a derogatory thing, or something of an inferior thing, and they would call them to be ummi, in the sense that they were unlettered in receiving God's message. So the worldly education or reading and writing are not mentioned in the Quran at all. I mean, in the sense that we use the word ummi.
So I use, the word fax machine simply because, in tradition, the understanding is that the Prophet transmitted as he received. So there was no change or interpretation of the message, or understanding and then transmission of the message.
That is correct. I mean, see, had he made his own understanding, had he injected his own understanding within the message would have become adulterated. It would not have become pure.
So
you see, God wanted his words.
But when you make the statement, even though you're saying you don't take a position on how revelation was revealed, you are taking a position, because you're saying, yeah, it was received in Arabic language, which the Prophet understood. So Gabriel brought to the Prophet God's message in Arabic language.
Right.
So when the divine gets expressed in a human language, it inevitably becomes a little bit of a hybrid of divine and human. I mean, we refer to God as he, and we know that God is not gendered. So there are limitations of the language, which, the scripture becomes part of.
As I said, you see, they have to be taken separately. As far as the word "he" being used as a limitation, that's another discussion. But the fact here is that God wants a faithful communication or transmission of whatever he has revealed. And on several occasions, he has said that the message has been delivered as it has been received. And you'll see in the last verses of Surah Jinn, which say that the Almighty has set up people or angels who see whether the message has been delivered in the exact way that it was transmitted. So you see, the position that we are taking is just one, and that is that this mechanism is not known to us, that how is it that Gabriel reveals it to his heart. the mechanism is just being, we are not aware of that. That is something that only God knows. But there is no disputing the fact that whatever is revealed in words. And if the divine, the divine has its connection with the mundane, it's in its purest form, that whatever that divine message is, it's converted in the same way as the prophet would have understood. So the same words which were sent down by the Almighty, for example, were received by the prophet the way they were revealed. The only thing is that how this happened is beyond us. We don't have any knowledge of that. But the Quran makes it amply clear that this divine transcendence in which divine messages get to the prophet, they are received the way they are sent, and then the way they are disseminated by the prophet is exactly the way that he received them.
So can you refer me to where it says it's received in words?
It's what?
That is transmitted in words.
This is Surah Shura. It says, "Ma kana li basharin an yukallimahu Allahu illa wahyan aw min wara'i hijab." Look at the last paragraph of Surah Shura, which is the 42nd Surah of the Quran.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up later.
Thank you. Nashaba Wasim, you may ask your question now.
Assalamualaikum, sir. So my question is, what's the duties of the angel Mikhail?
That we don't know from the Quran, and we do know from the Torah or the Old Testament that he was the favored angel of the Jews, at least in their own understanding. But as far as his duties are concerned, the Quran is silent on them. All that we know very, very clearly are the duties of Gabriel, because he is mentioned specifically. His duties are mentioned that he was a muallim or a teacher to the Prophet himself, and that he brought down revelation. But regarding Mikhail, we don't have any specific information from the Quran.
Thank you, sir.
But we do know that he was a favored angel amongst the Jews.
So is there something in Torah or in other books to explain, or not?
Yes, I should think so.
Thank you, Riaz Khan. You may ask your question now, and that will be the final question for this lab. Yes, go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Walaikum salam.
The revelation, Quran's revelation, has been over a period of time. So the Quraysh, when they started out as kafirun or the deniers, they did not remain as deniers in the end, most of them at least. Now, why the Quran lumps all the Jews as the deniers or the mushrikeen? Because I am sure from them on also they accepted Musa alayhi salam's message. So lumping all the Jews into one Quran has sort of
so we are talking about Prophet Muhammad. For Prophet Muhammad, a very large part of the Jews did not accept him as a prophet. We know from Surah Al Imran that there was a very religious group amongst the Jews who were waiting for the prophet, and as soon as he arrived, they professed faith in him, and the Quran has praised them very much. So there was a group among them. But as far as this lumping of kufr on them is concerned, it's because of their denial of Prophet Muhammad.
Okay. So it's not the deniers
not just for Moses. Yeah. For Moses, they professed faith in him. They called him prophet of God, but they would go back on their words. They would make promises with him and then go back. They would tease him. They would harass him. The Quran has mentioned all these things. But the reason that they are taken to task in the Quran is not because, it's not as much because of Moses as it is because of their attitude regarding Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let us move on to the next part. This is now verse 101. There is a slight shift in topic, but once again, the Jews are still being addressed, so we are continuing with that. And the verse says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ كَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And this happened now also, when a prophet came to them from God in confirmation of the predictions which were with them. A group among those to whom the book was given through this book of God behind their backs, as if they did not even know about it. And so what did they do? وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِيلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. So we have to also understand that as far as the Quran is concerned, that the implied meaning is that they showed such indifference to the predictions about the last prophet mentioned in their own book, as if they were not even aware of them. So the Quran says that when a prophet came to them in the form of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they just did not accept him. Nabaza fariqum min allazina utul kitab, and they just disregarded the book that was given to them, and as if they did not even know him, know that book. And what did they do? This is what they did. And in order to harm the prophet, went after the devils, what the devils recite and chant in the name of Solomon's kingdom. They attribute such chants and recitals to Solomon, whereas Solomon was never guilty of disbelief. In fact, it is such devils that were guilty of disbelief. They would teach people witchcraft, and they went after that which was revealed to two angels, Harut and Marut. So, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُمْ وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ وَلَبِئْسَ مَا شَرَوْا بِهِ أَنفُسَهُمْ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. So as we connected to the previous paragraph or the previous sentence, and they went after that which was revealed to two angels, Harut and Marut, in Babylon. Yet these two would never instruct anyone without saying to him beforehand, we are only a trial for you, so do not enter into this disbelief. Even then, they would learn from them the charm by which they could create discord between husband and wife. And in reality, they could not have harmed anyone and what they learned except by God's permission. They knew this full well, and still they would learn that which would not give them any benefit, but which would harm them, even though they knew that anyone who buys such things has no share in the life to come. How evil is the thing for which they have sold their souls. Would they knew it. Would that they knew it. So now we come to another chapter of the life of the way they had conducted themselves, that as far as these people were concerned, when a book came to them and a prophet came with that book, they were not people who were going to accept it. They just threw it behind their backs. They just forsook it. And what they actually did was they indulged in witchcraft and all sorts of wizardry and magic. And this is something which we know that was rampant in the times of Solomon, and the remnants of what had happened in the times of Solomon, we know, persisted until the times of Prophet Muhammad's arrival as well. But then the Quran transfers us and takes us that what did happen in the times of Solomon, and what did happen was that witchcraft and wizardry had become very common in those times, and it had become a real trial and test for people. So God's established practice is that whenever people they're taken with such huge trials, the Almighty also gives them an antidote to this. So the antidote that was given in those times, in the times of Solomon, when people had engaged in a lot of wizardry and witchcraft, was that two angels by the name of Harut and Marut, they were actually given this antidote towards witchcraft. But it was a very, very testing sort of a discipline. And they used to say that, well, if you learn this from us, yes, you can beat these witches and wizards who practice this witchcraft. But it is a double-edged sword. If you misuse it, it can go against you. So, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. So, we are a trial for you as well. And what they did was, as the Quran says, that instead of learning the antidote for magic and witchcraft, which they could have, overcome as a result, what they did was, يَتَعَلَّمُونَ مَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُمْ. What was not beneficial for them, they started to learn that. And what was that? They would learn the discipline in which they could create this severance between a husband and wife. The thing which separates the two. So the Quran says that what they did was that فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ, that they would learn things, or they would learn those charms by which they could create this discord, disharmony between a husband and wife. And then this most important comment which is made by the Quran, which actually is a comment on witchcraft and wizardry and all these things that even now we face, that even if people get harmed by these things, then remember, it is not because it is per se, that evil is something that's going to work per se. It's only when God allows it to work does that evil work, and because of God's scheme, which is of course trial and test. So it's not that it has power of its own to harm people. Only when God allows it does it happen. So that is why it is said, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. They could not have harmed anyone with that, what they learned, except by God's leave or by God's permission. And so this is what is said in the Quran in a very, very tacit way. And as I said, that as far as the Quran is concerned, it has made this amply clear that instead of being people who would accept, who would welcome the book which they were waiting for, they just totally disregarded it. And not only did disregard it, but they went after harming the Prophet. So we know when the Prophet arrived in Medina, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he arrived in Medina, the Jews tried to weave a spell of magic on him as well. We know this, but they never succeeded, of course. It was not that they succeeded, but they tried to do so. And the Prophet was then armed with these two beautiful surahs of the Quran, which are the last two surahs, which of course were like a antidote for all such things given to him, that God told him that you have to seek refuge with me from all such things, because if they are going to do any harm, it's only by my permission. Otherwise, if you come into my protection, that's not going to happen. So, A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq and A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, two last surahs of the Quran, they were revealed for this purpose. And even today, if there is any such feeling in a person that, something has overcome him, and if medical science has ruled out anything, and there are things that you are, not aware of are happening with you, then there is no other antidote. You don't need to go to any peer or faqir for any antidote except to recite those two surahs, which bring you under God's protection. So this was like a slight divergence that I had to make in order to just explain more this fact that witchcraft and wizardry was so common among the Jews of Medina in those times that on the one hand, instead of accepting the Prophet, they tried to harm him by using this witchcraft and wizardry. And then, of course, the Almighty has connected it to its origin, that in the times of Solomon, witchcraft and wizardry had become very common, but the Almighty revealed its antidote. And that antidote was something, when that was revealed, it was revealed in the way that two angels, Harut and Marut in Babylon, they would teach people that, well, if you have to have this antidote, you can have it, but it could be a trial against you as well. And they misused this trial. This thing which the Quran clearly says, that instead of learning what they could do against magicians and conjurers and sorcerers, what they did was they started to learn things which could create discord between husband and wife. So however potent magic and witchcraft can be, it is possible, that it can be extremely potent, but the fact is that it can only work by God's leave. Secondly, it also seems precisely in line with this divine practice of sending help in the form of a legitimate and rightful discipline to combat an evil discipline that was being used in such a potent manner by these miscreants. So it was like God helping his creation for this. So the important thing here is that not only has the Quran prescribed it, but we also know that the Torah itself has said that this is something which is absolutely horrendous, and you should not in any way indulge in magic and witchcraft and these things. And I would like to cite the Torah here. This is chapter 18. I'm going to just read out from my own text. So this is chapter 18 and book of Deuteronomy, basically. And this book of Deuteronomy is as you know, is the revised canon. This is verses 9 and 12. And I have discussed this earlier on as well, that the revised canon of the book of Deuteronomy, in the words and opinion of Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, is the real Torah. The first 4 books are the books in which the Torah was revealed in its chronological form. So it's like a chronological revelation. But the fifth book, which is the fifth book of the Pentateuch, which is the book of Deuteronomy, is the recompilation of the four books in the final form. So just as the Quran was recompiled after its chronological revelation, we know that we have a new arrangement. In a very similar way, the book of Deuteronomy is the real Torah. It was now in a rearranged form, just as the Quran we have is in its rearranged form. So I'm just going to read out this small paragraph from the Torah or the Old Testament, in which the Jews were also equally prohibited to indulge in witchcraft. So it's not just at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, but in their own times as well. In the times of Solomon and earlier prophets too, they were stopped from doing this. So it says, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices his son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord, and because of these detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. So such is the vehemence and the stress which the Almighty has laid as far as witchcraft is concerned. So now finishing off the last part, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَمَثُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِندِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. And had they embraced faith and adopted righteousness, far better for them was the reward they would have reaped before God, would they but knew it. So once again, I mean, a person who would be aware of Arabic would know what an expression of sorrow and what an expression of sadness it is on the part of the Almighty. You see, لَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَمَثُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِندِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ. It's like that yearning, that look at these people, that time and again they've gone back on their word. Had they embraced faith and adopted righteousness, it would have been far better for them than what they are now doing. So you will see this sorrow and this sadness. It's not just the wrath of the Almighty, but this element of sorrow and sadness also, that these Israelites were given this position of conveying the truth to the other nations of the world, and look how they messed it up totally. So now we can have questions for the part that we have just started.
I believe Shabnam has the first question now. Shabnam, please go ahead.
Thank you. Sir, it's a bit strange question, sir. I believe that Allah loves all His creation equally, all human beings. And the purpose of creating human beings was to choose them for heaven.
Okay, can I please interrupt here? If your question is it directly related to the text that we have studied, or is it a general question?
Sir, it was related that Allah has put so many tests, difficult tests, like He knew that people would indulge in witchcraft, and it was related to that it was like some sort of test as well. And Allah knew that people will get indulged in this. So it seems that Allah has made the test very difficult for a common person. And it seems that He loves His heavens more than His creation. Otherwise, why He would make this test so difficult? That was the question.
So you see, the answer has been given by God Himself in these very verses, that when the test becomes difficult, the answer or the antidote also is something which is revealed by God. So precisely for this reason, Harut and Marut were given this divine knowledge, and this was a discipline, a type of knowledge that was given to them, so that the test of magic and sorcery which the Israelites were faced, they could ward it off. They could just do away with it by using this help from God. So these two angels were in fact God's help against this witchcraft and wizardry. So it's not that the trial was difficult. I mean, the trial, of course, yes, there were parts of it that needed your willpower. But the fact is that if you used your willpower, then you had the weapon in your hand by that knowledge given to you through Harut and Marut, which would counter that witchcraft.
Thank you. Naveed Irfan, you may go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, ये जो इल्म यहाँ पर बताया गया है, ये तो जो हारूत और मारूत दो फरिश्ते सिखाते हैं, तो ये जादू के डिफरेंस है ना, मतलब ये वो इल्म नहीं है जो जादू का जो इल्म होता है।
Magic. No, it's
जी,
not.
वो तो
That's something else, and that is why it is explicitly said, "Yu'allimuna an-nas as-sihr." These people would teach people magic. As far as these angels are concerned, they would not teach magic. They would teach the antidote to magic.
जी, मतलब जो जादू होता है ये उसके पहले से मौजूद था, लेकिन एक टेस्ट के लिए एक दूसरा इल्म नाजिल किया गया, उसके लिए इन्होंने गलत इस्तेमाल किया उसका.
Yes, precisely. I mean, they could have used this discipline to counter that magic, because it was precisely for this reason that it was revealed. But instead of using it for this purpose, they started to use it for creating discord between husband and wife and other evil things.
जी, शुक्रिया बहुत.
Thank you. Riyaz, you may ask a question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr.
Salam.
In this ayah, I mean, the ma has been used about 10 times. So the first 2 times it's used as in a negative way, but on the third time, then it is not used as a negative. I mean, so how we decide? I mean, how they decide?
I mean, it's very. I mean, you see, if you have that depth of knowledge of Arabic language, the classical idiom, it's not at all difficult. I mean, for a person who might be having a perfunctory knowledge of Arabic, it might be difficult. But if you have that flair, it's not at all difficult. For example, when it is stated that "Wattabu ma tatlu shayateen," so it is evident from this coordination, from the words "ma unzila" used for this discipline, that it was revealed to the angels. So, I mean, it was a divine sort of a thing. And the fact that the word "ma" is used at times as a demonstrative pronoun, or at times as a particle of negation, this is, as I said, I mean, you just need to have a good grasp of the Arabic language.
I don't have, but I am seeing. I have seen some scholars. They mention they claim that they have the knowledge of Arabic. So they are saying this the third ma unzila ala al-malakaini bi Babila Harut. That means
yes, you're correct. This also means magic. Yes, you're correct. You see, what you can say is that human beings can never be perfect. I mean, all of us, I mean, people can claim that they have good knowledge of Arabic, and on most occasions they might display this good knowledge. But as human beings, at times we make errors also, and these are human errors. So I know the thing that you're referring to here, because that translation actually tells us that these angels were also indulging in witchcraft and magic. That is not the case, and that is why the word "ma" has been used in a way that it gives you this impression. And as I said, yes, at times even very, very able scholars, I mean, they make such a mistake, and I mean, this is something which all of us as human beings know. So I think that, and one more thing that I would also add here is that in the case of the Quran, there are things which have compounded it, and that is because it's not just the Quran which is interpreted through its words. So you look at Hadith literature and secondary literature first, and then you come to the Quran. So because you find certain narratives when you study these verses, which speak of the fact that these are 2 fallen angels, these are 2 angels who lost the favor of God because of certain things that they did, and they were sent on earth for this reason. There's a whole story behind it. If you read Ibn Kathir, you'll find out. So it's basically outside the Quran sources, which at times make you, I mean, or force you, I would say, to make that erroneous interpretation and readjust the Quran, because you think that outside of the Quran, the Hadith and other literature which is present, I mean, you give more sanctity to it. So in the case of the Quran, this has also been a reason.
But in case of, I mean, Harut and Marut, for example, it could be argued also that, I mean, we are taking it from the Torah, whether it's in Ibn Kathir or any other Hadith. So, I mean, and the Quran also says whatever we have told them, there is a lot of kufr there. I mean, you can't believe. I mean, in there that so also.
See, again, I understand what you're saying, but I would again, I mean, remind you of the fact that such is the potent tenet, I would say, that you have to look towards Hadith literature first and then look at the Quran. This is a principle which our traditional scholars generally follow. They don't interpret the Quran directly from its text. They do it from extra textual sources, and foremost being Hadith literature. So because in Hadith literature, this whole story has been put forth in a way that Harut and Marut are portrayed as condemned angels. unfortunately. So therefore, you'll find it. I mean, it's not classical hadith literature. I would say a lot of hadith literature which is affected by the Israelite traditions, and that is why precisely we call those narratives as Israeliyat, which means that which have the stories of the people of the book. So because of their abundance in our tafsir books and because of the the influence that they hold, this happens, and this is not just here. As you move along in the Quran, you'll find so many other instances in which this has happened.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sattar Ahmed. You may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem.
Walaikum assalam.
Yeah, so just a quick question about the whole Harut and Marut thing in Ibn Kasir. So, I mean, I think it's a general rule of thumb that, you know, angels themselves, you know, they don't, defect or go rogue or anything like that. So just curious as to, you know, how that narration can even be accepted.
Yes, I mean, this is a question that I too have. I mean, it's the fact that you see what happens is when you stick to a particular rule, then you don't think much about the content. So the rule that was made was that you have to consult hadith literature before, you interpret the Quran, and it's like something that it's like a rule of thumb, something that has an established thing. So whenever this has become established as a principle, what happens is that, I mean, people disregard the content. They stop using their common sense because once the principle has been made, they just apply that principle relentlessly without even applying their own senses or common sense, I would say, in this regard. So it's just a question of becoming a slave to a principle and just working it out whenever it comes.
Okay, and this principle is like fully like man-made, right? It has no like divine standing.
It is the principle. I mean, this is a principle which our traditional scholars have made it. Okay. I mean, and I think I've taught a whole course of 75 sessions earlier on, in which I have made this comparison between the traditional approach and the Fara'i approach regarding certain areas of the Quran, selected portions of the Quran, in which I have shown and compared how you can see that because of the availability of hadith literature, because of the reliance of hadith literature, which has become a statute, it's like a cardinal principle accepted by traditional scholars, that they will not understand the Quran directly. They will always first refer to the hadith. Right. So whether you see Tabari, whether you see Ibn Kasir, these are two very great exponents of tafsir Masur, which means interpreting the Quran through hadith. So, and this is the dominant genre of interpreting the Quran in our ummah, and that is why you find people, I mean, in lots and in large numbers going after that. It is Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi, if you know about him, that he is the one who broke these shackles about a century ago, and he said that, well, the Quran has been revealed in clear and lucid Arabic and eloquent Arabic, and it's nowhere in the Quran that it is said that it needs to be interpreted through an external agency, like, for example, hadith or history. On the contrary, it tells us that it is a book that has to be reflected upon. It is a book that you have to give your attention to, and you can deduce and make your inferences directly from the text of the Quran. So you see, this is a whole comparison that you have to understand, and our whole tradition of traditional scholars is standing on one side, and they are in the majority.
Right. So it's like mostly just dogma backed, I would say, then.
Yes.
In that case. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. You may ask your question.
Dr. Shehzad, sorry, I just wanted to ask which course is that you're referring to, because I have missed the previous courses that where you were highlighting approach through the Quran of the Quran.
I think it was called the analytical study of the Quran.
Oh, the analytical study, inshallah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think there are YouTube videos on that one, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Annie, you may ask your question now.
So is it okay to follow up on the previous conversation, or should we save it for later?
I think let us save it for later, because that's a conversation that could prove endless, and you can have it personally as well. For the moment, actually, I wanted, if you have a question on this part, then please you can raise it. Otherwise, I wanted to have that literal translation process started.
Okay, thank you.
That was the last
So,
question for this part, Dr. Shehzad.
okay. So now I'm going to do that literal and idiomatic translation once again for your own purpose of being acquainted and customized to the Arabic language and some of the words, so that through repeated translation you are able to make sense of the words themselves. So let's start off with the very first part that we studied. وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Wa and is remember. Akhazna, we took. Misaq, covenant. Bani Israel, from the Israelites. La, don't. Ta'buduna, worship. Except. Illa is except. Allah, God. So, idiomatic translation would be that recall that when you took a misaq from the Israelites, recall when we took a covenant from the Israelites. And what was that covenant? La ta'buduna illallah. Do not worship anyone except God. La ta'buduna, don't worship. Illa, except God. And then the covenant continues. What was added to it? Wa bil walidaini ihsana. And with your parents, be kind. Ihsana, show kindness. Wa and zil qurba, to your kinsfolk, to your relatives. Wa and yatama are your orphans. It's the plural of yatim. And al-miskin, al-masakin, which is the plural of miskin, which mean the poor. Wa and qulu, say. Linnas, to people. Husna, what is good. So the translation would be that the covenant which was taken from the Israelites was that do not worship anyone except God. Be kind to your parents and to your relatives and to the orphans and to the destitute, and say what is good to people. I mean, always be good to people. Qulu linnasi husna. Wa and aqimus salah. This is, I mean, the covenant is continuing. This is the covenant which the Bani Israel, remember the Israelites, they had given their word that they will not worship anyone but God. And look what happened. They started to worship the calf. And they were told to be kind to their parents and to their kinsfolk and to the destitute and to the orphans and to say good to people. And then see what the Quran says, aqimus salah. And this was also a covenant that was taken from you, that you will adhere to the salah. You will diligently abide by the prayer. So aqama yuqimu or aqimu here means that it's not just praying. It means that you have to be diligent in the prayer. If you make due consideration of the Arabic language, the word used is not you just pray. It's not says that you pray. It says you establish the prayer. So it actually the word establish the prayer is a literal translation, but the idiomatic one is that you are diligent in the prayer. Wa and atu, you give. Zakah. Thumma, then tawallaytum, you turn back, except qalila, few, minkum, from you, wa and antum, you, mu'rizun, who turn away. So a literal translation would be, an idiomatic translation would be, then all of you except a few, tawallaytum illa qalilam minkum. Tawallaytum means to turn away. Tawalla is just to turn your back. Literally, it means ignore something. So you made this covenant. The Israelites, they made this covenant. They said, yes, we will worship God only. We will pray. We will pay the zakah, and we will be good to people. But what happened was that you turned away from them except a few. So all of you disobeyed or went back on this covenant. Illa qalilam minkum, except for a few among you. And the fact is that you are people who always go back. Wa antum mu'rizun, you are such people who always evade promises. And then it says, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ لَا تَسْفِكُونَ دِمَاءَكُمْ وَلَا تُخْرِجُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ ثُمَّ أَقْرَرْتُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَشْهَدُونَ. Va and is, remember. Akhazna, we took. This is exactly the same word which occurs in the previous paragraph also. We took misakakum, your covenant. And what was that? La, do not. Tasfikuna, shed. Dima'akum, your blood. Wa and la, don't. Tukhrijuna, expel. Anfusakum, yourselves. Min, from. Diyarikum, your cities. Thumma, then. Aqrartum, you agreed. Wa and antum, you, tashhadun, you were its witnesses. So the idiomatic translation would be that remember when we took this covenant from you. So this is a second covenant. The first covenant was mentioned in the previous verses. Now this is a mention of another covenant, that we took another covenant from you. And what was that? That you will not shed blood. Tasfikuna dima'akum. Tasfikuna, shed, dima'akum, blood. You will not shed your blood, neither will you expel your people from your cities. Then you made this promise. You summa aqrartum, you agreed to it. Wa antum tashhadun, and you were as witnesses. So you said, yes, we accept this covenant. Then what happened? Summa antum haulai taqtuluna anfusakum wa tukhrijuna fariqam minkum min diyarihim. Summa, then, antum, you, haulai, you are those taqtuluna who kill anfusakum, yourselves. Of course, we have discussed this earlier on, that it says taqtuluna anfusakum, it doesn't mean you kill your own selves. It means you kill amongst your own brethren, people amongst yourselves. Wa tukhrijuna, and you expel, fariqan, one group, minkum, from you, min, from diyarihim, their territory. Tazaharuna, you, tazaharuna alayhim actually is one word. This means that you get together against them, you conspire against them. Tazaharuna alayhim would be that you become united against them, bil ithmi wal udwan, by committing sin. Be is through, ism is sin, wa, and udwan is excess, to do something excessive, I mean to exceed something. And then it says that wa iyatukum usara, wa, and in, if. Yatukum means come to you, usara, as captives, as prisoners. So usara is the plural, usara. And tufaduhum, you give ransom. Tufaduhum, you give ransom of them. Wa, and huwa, that it muharramun alaykum, it was forbidden to you. Muharramun, forbidden, alaykum, on you. Ikhrajuhum, their expulsion. So you see, the idiomatic translation would be that you first committed to the fact that you will not shed blood and you will not expel your own people from these places. We have already discussed the tafsir aspect of this. But then what did you do? That you are the people who killed your own brethren and who expelled one of their groups from their territories, and you became united against them through sin and through excesses. And when these people would come to you as prisoners, as usara, as prisoners, tufaduhum, you would give fidya, you would ransom them. Wahuwa muharram, whereas the fact is that even expelling them was forbidden to you. Remember, you had made this commitment that you will not expel them. Now, this very, very strong sentence of anger. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْدِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْدِ. Will you people express faith بِبَعْدِ الْكِتَابِ, on one part of the book, in one part of the book. Be is on it's a preposition with amana, and ba'az is one part. Al-kitab, of the book. Wa, and takfuruna, you will deny, biba'az, another part. So in this way, you express faith in one part and you deny the other part, because as a book, it was told, I mean, the book had told you that you would not expel your people from their land and you would not kill them. But this you denied. But when those people would come to you, you would, give them ransom. You would free them from ransom. So in this way, you are guilty of, on the one hand, denying the book, and on the other hand, accepting the book. So then again, this is a very, very strong sentence from the Quran. The anger exudes from every part of the verse. فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. So, فَمَا is therefore what? Therefore, ma, what? Jaza, reward. Man, he. Yaf'alu, does. Zalika, this thing, which has just happened. Minkum, from amongst you. Except. Illa is except. Khizyun. Khizyun is humiliation. Fi, in. Al-hayat, al-haya is life. Ad-dunya is this world. So, the idiomatic translation would be, then what is the reward of those who do this from among you? So, Fama, what? Jaza is the reward. Man yaf'alu, who do, zalika, this, minkum, from amongst you, who do this from amongst you, people who are guilty of this amongst you. What do they do? And what did they do? That has been mentioned before. So what is the reward except humiliation? What is the reward except disgrace in the life of this world? And not just here. Then the Quran says, وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. Wa, and Yawma is day. Al-Qiyamah, judgment, day of judgment. Yuraduna, you shall be relegated, you shall be turned. Ila, towards Ashaddil Azab, even a greater torment. So it says that your torment in this world is disgrace, and on the day of judgment, Yawmal Qiyamati Yuraduna, they shall be reverted to even a greater torment. They shall be turned and they shall be shoved towards an even greater torment. Ashaddil Azab. Wa, and Mallahu bighafilin. Ma is nafiya, is the particle of negation here, not. Allah, God, bighafilin, ghafil, is unaware. Amma is always anma, which means, the word an is then just suppressed and it is written as one, as amma, as an is about, and ma is what? Ta'malun, what you do. And so the idiomatic translation would be that God is not unaware of what you do. Ta'malun is what you do, amma is about that what you do. So wallahu bighafilin amma ta'malun. And then ulaika allazina ishtaraw al-hayat ad-dunya. Ulaika, these people, allazina, who, ishtaraw means they have bought, al-hayat ad-dunya, the life of this world, be, in exchange, al-akhirah, hereafter. So these are the people who have bought this life in exchange of the hereafter. In other words, they have given preference to this life instead of the hereafter. Fala yukhaffafu. Fala is fa is therefore, la is not. Yukhaffafu, shall be decreased. So therefore not decreased. Anhum. An is from whom, them. Al azab is torment. Wa is and. La is not. Hum is they. Yunsarun, helped. So idiomatically we would say, so therefore their azab or their torment shall not be decreased. Fala yukhaffafu anhumul azab. It's not that as a result of what they have done, their torment shall be decreased. No, the torment shall not be decreased. Fala, not. Therefore, not yukhaffafu, decreased, anhum, from them, al azab, torment, wala hum yunsarun, and neither shall they be helped. And they shall also not be helped. They shall not be given any help. Yunsarun, they shall be helped. And la is, of course, negating it, meaning that they shall not be helped. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَقَفَّيْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ بِالرُّسُلِ وَآتَيْنَا عِيسَى ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ الْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. Wa, and laqad, indeed, آتَيْنَا, we gave Musa, Moses, al-Kitab, the book, of course referring to the Torah. Wa, and kafaina means we sent one after the other. Kafaina means that without any break, one after the other. We did so. What did we do so? Min ba'dihi, after him. After who? After Moses. Bir Rusul, messengers or prophets. So the Quran says, after we gave the book to Moses, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ, we gave Moses the book and sent prophets one after the other after them, after the departure of Moses. So we know that from Moses to Jesus, there was no gap of prophets. There never ever occurred a gap. One prophet came and the next would come in the presence of the previous one, and then he would depart and the next would then go. So this was what the Quran has said, one after the other. Kafaina means one after the other. Min ba'dihi, after Moses, bi Rusul. Wa atayna, wa, and atayna, we gave Isa ibn Maryam. Isa ibn Maryam is Jesus, son of Mary. Al-Bayyinat. Al-Bayyinat means very clear signs. Wa, and ayyadnahu. Ayyadnahu means we helped him. Ayyadnahu, we helped him. Bi Ruhil Qudus. Be, with. Ruhul Qudus, the Holy Spirit. Ruh is spirit, Qudus is holy. So the idiomatic translation would be, and we gave Jesus, son of Mary, Ataina, we gave Jesus, son of Mary, al-Bayyinat, clear signs. And we also helped him through the Holy Spirit. وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. In other words, we helped him with Gabriel. أَفَكُلَّمَا جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ بِمَا لَا تَهْوَى أَنفُسُكُمُ اسْتَكْبَرْتُمْ. Afakullama means would that in every case, or whenever, ja'akum comes to you, rasulun, a messenger, bima, with what, la, not, tahwa, desire, anfusukum, yourselves. What will happen? Istakbartum, you become arrogant. So, idiomatically would mean that will this happen that whenever a Rasul comes to you, Ja'akum comes to you, Rasul, Bima la tahwa, with that which you do not like, ma, not, la, Bima is that, la is not, tahwa means what you desire. So when a messenger comes to you with that which you don't desire, what will happen? Istakbartum, you will show arrogance. And this is like a very, very strong question being asked by the Quran. And then, فَفَرِيقًا كَذَّبْتُمْ وَفَرِيقًا تَقْتُلُونَ, and then you deny one of the groups and you kill the other. So what happens is that you kill some of the prophets and you denied some of the prophets. فَفَرِيقًا كَذَّبْتُمْ, so when one group of prophets you kazzabtum, you denied, and فَفَرِيقًا تَقْتُلُونَ, and the other group you killed. And we have seen how both Zachariah and John, they were killed by them. And then it says, wa, and qalu, they said, qulubuna, our hearts, gulf, have covers. Our hearts are covered. Wa qalu qulubuna gulf would mean they say that our hearts are covered. They are in a seal. But bal is no, in fact. La'anahumullah, God has cursed them. La'anahumullah, God has cursed them because of their kufr. Bikufrim means because of their disbelief. Fa, therefore, qalilan, very few. Ma, that. Yu'minun, ma is who? Yu'minun, believe. So, idiomatically, it would mean this is not the case that your hearts are covered. The comment of the Quran is, in fact, God has cursed you because of your kufr. But la'anahumullahu, God has cursed them because of their kufr. It's not you, it's them. But la'anahumullah, God has cursed them because of their kufr, because of their disbelief. فَقَلِيلًا مَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, so they shall believe but little. Qalilam is little, ma, what they believe. So they will believe little, which means that they will end up believing little, or there will be very few believers from among them. That is the implied meaning. And then, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ كِتَابٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ وَكَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Wa, and lamma, when, ja'ahum, came to them, kitabun, book, min, from, indillahi, from, min is also min, it also means God, from, min, indi means, from the presence of God. Indillah means it from God, in fact. So idiomatically you can translate it as when a book came to them from God, musaddiqun. Musaddiqun means in confirmation. Lima, in reality, musaddiqun le is one word. Musaddiqun le would mean in confirmation of what was with them. Ma ma'ahum. Ma'ahum is what was with them. Of course, referring to the fact that they already had the Torah, and when a book came in confirmation of the predictions which were with them, what did they do? And in fact, instead of answering that, the Quran has gone a step further and said, وَكَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. And they were once, وَكَانُوا, wa, and kanu, they were, min qabl is before that, yastaftihuna, asking for victory. They were asking for victory. Ala, on, ala allazina kafaru. Allazina is those, kafaru is those who denied. So idiomatically would be that they were the people who before this were asking for victory against those people who had denied. So, this is like a parenthetical sentence. It's like a sentence within a sentence. The previous sentence was not finished and we have now an insertion. So the Quran says that when a book came to them from God, which was in confirmation to the book they had, and the fact is that they were waiting, وَكَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ, they were waiting for victory on these people, referring to the mushrikun, al-lazina kafaru. So now the word is repeated here. The lamma of the previous verse, the previous section is once again repeated and says, فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ, Ma arafu kafaru bihi. So therefore, lamma, when ja'ahum, came to them, ma, what? Arafu, they recognized, kafaru bihi, they rejected it. So when that which they recognized came to them, meaning that they recognized the book, they knew that this was the book that had been predicted, whose arrival had been predicted. What did they do? Kafaru bihi. They rejected it. فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Therefore, la'natullah, the curse of God. La'natullah, curse of God. Ala, on, al-kafirin, these kafirun. So the fact is that when the book arrived, whose predictions were found in their own scriptures, and they were in fact waiting for it, and they knew that through it they will be able to obtain victory against the mushrikun. So what happened was that when the book came, and this is not a book that was unintroduced to them, this was a book for which they had already known that it would become. So the Quran says, ma arafu, they recognized it. They fully knew that this is the book that they were waiting for. But what did they do after that? Kafaru bihi. Instead of accepting it, they rejected it. And then fala'natullahi al-kafirin. So therefore, the curse of God be on these disbelievers. Bi'sama. Bi'sama means what an evil thing. Ishtarau bihi would mean they have bought through this anfusahum, their own souls, for their own souls. An yakfuru, an is that, yakfuru, they have denied, bima, bima is what, anzalallahu, anzala means to reveal, God, Allah, baghyan, because of arrogance, baghyan is arrogance, an that, yunazzilu, yunazzila, God has, yunazzila means to reveal, Allah, God, so God has revealed, min, from, fazlihi, his blessing, ala, on, man, on whom, yasha, he wants, min, from, ibadihi, his servants. Fa, therefore, ba'u, they returned, bighadabin, with one anger, ala, upon, ghadabin, another anger. So they returned with one anger after the other. Va, and, lil kafirin, for these disbelievers, azabun, azab is azab, torment, muhin is humiliating or disgraceful torment. So this is one of the very difficult sentences of the Quran, because a lot of things have been suppressed here, but I'll try to translate it for you idiomatically. So bi'sama ishtarau bihi anfusahum would mean that what an evil thing is for which they have sold away themselves. In fact, the word ishtara has both these meanings. It is to buy and to sell. This is one of the words in the Quran which has opposite meanings, and such words in the Quran or in the Arabic language are called azdad. Azdad with the dha, which means they have opposite meanings. So just as ishtara also means to sell, it also means to buy. So here it is actually in this meaning that they have sold, bi'sama ishtarau bihi anfusahum. And what an evil thing there is that which they have sold away themselves with. And what is that? An yakfuru bima anzalallahu baghyan. That in because of mere I would say rebelliousness, an yakfuru bima anzalallahu, they have denied what God has revealed. They have denied what God has revealed. And now that complex part, and what is that? An yunazzala min fazlihi ala man yasha'u min ibadihi. And what is that? That is that this stubbornness or this rebelliousness is what is that God has revealed from his blessings, min fazlihi ala man yasha'u min ibadihi, on whomsoever he wants. So the fact is that the Quran is telling them that what an evil thing that they have done. What an evil thing that they have done, that they have sold away their souls and they have sold away themselves. And what is that? That in their mere rebelliousness, they think that why should God send to a person from his own blessings? Why should he choose someone else rather than their own selves with this book, with this new prophet, and reveal the Quran to them? So basically, it's like God telling them that this is what they have done, that in their own rebelliousness, in their own stubbornness, in their own anger, they have denied this book. And then what has happened is, فَبَاءُوا بِغَضَبٍ عَلَىٰ غَضَبٍ, they have returned with wrath upon wrath, with ghadab after ghadab, with anger after anger. And walil kafirina azabun muhin. And for these disbelievers is a great or a disgraceful torment. So remember, I have been translating the alif lam in the previous verse also and in this verse as these disbelievers. And this is one of the things that I have pointed out earlier as well, that alif lams must be translated in the Quran. Otherwise, when you translate it in a general sense, it would imply that all sorts of disbelievers will be receiving the torment of God. This is not the case. There is a special context here. Of course, all sorts of disbelievers would be receiving God's wrath in some way or the other. But here the context is towards the Jews, that these are the people who are denied. So for such people, for such deniers is the torment of God. So it is important for a translator of the Quran and a person who reads the Quran to always make sense by looking for translations in which this alif lam is also unveiled. So I'm not going to go any further because we have just a few minutes left. The remaining translation, inshallah, we'll do next time. But just to reiterate what we have studied today, that this charge sheet of, you'll find this word being repeated time after time. Is a khazna misakakum. Is a khazna misakakum. Remember when we took this covenant from you. Remember when we took this covenant for you to obey God, to be kind to your parents, to be diligent in your prayer, and to pay zakat. And remember when we took this covenant from you that you'll not shed blood, you'll not kill your people. And remember when we took this covenant from you that when this prophet of ours would come, you would believe in him. So you see, there is this whole charge sheet which is presented in such a graphic way in the Quran. And the anger of God, as you can see, it exudes very clearly from these verses, making it amply clear why his anger. Why is he so overcome with anger? Because of the fact that they were repeatedly given these chances and they repeatedly went back on their words, and they continued to do so until in their own time. Until the times of the last prophet of the Israelites, who was Jesus, they went as far as to kill him, and in their own minds they had actually crucified him as per their own thought. That is a separate thing that God did not allow them to do, but they went as far as to kill the last of the Israelite prophets. So such is the intensity of their crime, which is now mentioned in the Quran. So if anyone has a question in these last couple of minutes, she's most welcome to ask it. Otherwise, inshallah, we'll call it a day. And the next verses, or the little translation of the remaining verses, and the next part of the Quran, inshallah, will be brought up in our next session.
I have a written question, Dr. Shehzad, and we'll be taking it as the only question now. It refers to the part where shabu fi qulubihim wa ajlu bi kufrihim. Does bi kufrihim show here that one sin is actually a punishment of committing an earlier sin? Or shall we consider it as one sin as an outcome or result of a previous sin? Because every action has a reaction or outcome in this world.
So this was in our previous, the previous verses that we had. And I would need to look them up to give you an answer. But in all probability, on the face of it, it does seem when it says that وَأُشْرِبُوا فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الْإِجْلَ بِكُفْرِهِمْ is referring to a previous thing. It's referring to this. The consequence that this crime happened was because of the denial that they already had. So it's referring to something prior. As I said, I would need to look it up to give you an exact answer.
93 है सर, 93 आया.
Okay, is it verse 93?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, so you see, it is clear. The verse says, "Khuzū mā ātaynākum biquwwatin wasma'u qālū sami'nā wa asayna." So this asayna is being referred to here, that they, instead of adopting this attitude of obedience, they adopted this attitude of disobedience. So this attitude of disobedience was something which was instrumental in making that deity and making that calf their deity. So I understand this kufrihim to be referring to this attitude of sami'na wa asayna, that they said that they believe, they will follow what Moses would say, but they would ultimately end up disobeying him. So this act of disobeying is referring to this kufr, that because of the fact that they were continuously disobeying him, now when the time came to not indulge in idolatry, they took this step also, and that disobeying attitude resulted in this act.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I would request the other participants to please take your questions in the next week's class. That's the end from my side, Dr. Shehzad.
Okay, thank you very much.